Okay, so welcome to the webinar. The topic is, what is Peristeam hydrotherapy? The women's health profession rising from the ancient practice of vaginal steaming. Okay, so I wanted to start off and just talk about the legend of the phoenix. We all have probably heard about the legend of the phoenix. The phoenix is like a mystical bird, and apparently every 500 years, this bird is supposed to renew itself. Um, it is supposed to like turn into ashes and then renew itself. Okay, so I had heard that before, but recently one of my friends, Chris, my colleague, she sent me this video, and I'm gonna share it with you guys. Not the video, okay, sorry. She sent me this video that was talking about this book, and this book had a phoenix in it, and you'll never guess what the phoenix was doing. Okay, so actually you guys probably will guess. I'm going to share with the screen real quick. Okay, can you guys still hear me okay? I hope you guys can hear me okay. But here we have a book from Johann Rimland, who was a physician in the 1600s in England, and he created this book. Hey, is the audio in and out when I share the screen? It's okay, yeah. You know, it's supposed to be able to share the screen, but it doesn't do it that well. Okay, I'm gonna switch over, and I'm gonna let you guys look at the photo, and then I'm gonna switch back and I'm gonna talk about the photo. Okay, you guys with me? Okay. Okay, so what you guys were looking at is a pop-up book made by a physician in 1619 named Johann Rimland. Okay, so Rimland was a physician, and he created this pop-up book to show people basically anatomy, to teach his students anatomy. And so what you guys saw was his image of, what he did was he created an image of Eve, okay, the first woman. And the way that the book works is really cool. You can actually like take it apart. You know, it shows like her different, like, you know, organs and stuff. But what you notice underneath Eve is that there is a stream of smoke going into her vagina, which is vaginal steaming. And then what you notice at the bottom of the smoke, there's a fire with a phoenix in it. So the phoenix, so the phoenix, part of the story of the phoenix is that the phoenix prepares herbs, and the phoenix smolders these herbs into smoke, and then turns itself into ashes and then renews. Okay, so now the herbs that the phoenix uses, that I was able to find, are myrrh, which is traditionally used for vaginal steaming, and then also cinnamon twigs, which is also another herb used in women's health. So this phoenix smolders these herbs into smoke, and then turns itself into ashes and is reborn. And so the commentary from Rimland, the author of this book, was that really the renewal of this, the rebirth happens from a woman's womb, right? Because women are able to birth in their womb. So it was just so interesting to me. So I started to, you know, Google search and try to find any other references to the phoenix and the rebirth actually being through the rebirth of the phoenix coming through a woman's womb, but that was the only reference that I could find. So somebody was asking, the two herbs were myrrh and cinnamon, cinnamon twigs, cinnamon sticks. That's what the at least when I was looking at the legend of the phoenix, those two were common throughout. But apparently, the phoenix used all kinds of vaginal steam herbs in order to renew. So it's just a really interesting, like the phoenix. I mean, that legend, the beautiful bird, the Japanese phoenix tattoos. I've just seen, so many beautiful images of the phoenix, and the idea that that the phoenix is actually, a vaginal steam, and then the renewal of life comes through a woman's womb. It's just a really powerful, thought and image. So I wanted to share that with you guys. So now let's talk a little bit more about the ancient practice of vaginal steaming. Oh, one other thing about that. So when we are looking at vaginal steaming, that was a British reference to vaginal steaming, and what we have found is that vaginal steaming was practiced throughout Europe, and it was in Britain. It actually had a really sexy name. It was called fumigation therapy. So it was smelly womb treatment. So not very sexy, but they did in fact have vaginal steaming, and that photo is another testament to the practice in Europe. Okay, so but other than that, vaginal steaming is actually found all over the world. So my first experience with it was that I found it I learned about it from a Mayan womb healer, a Guatemalan woman, and she told me that it was practiced, in Mayan abdominal therapy. Then I found a Korean spa that offered it, and then I was actually online, and there was a Ghanaian woman mentioning that she used it, and a Haitian woman that mentioned that they used it postpartum, right? And so I was like really, I was really interested in like where it actually comes from. My background, I have a degree in international development, so I'm interested in like, international topics and like, just, cultural things. So I started to keep track of all of the different places that I would find firsthand accounts of vaginal steaming, and so I also found it in an old traveler's journal to Hawaii in 1903. A priest that wrote about that the women were doing it. I found it in Palau. I found it in Papua New Guinea, Suriname, Guyana, Panama, Nicaragua, 3 different areas of Mexico. I found 3 different states where it's practiced by indigenous populations. I found it is practiced by the Lakota Nation, by the Navajo Nation, in Italy, Sweden, Turkey, India, all throughout Africa, and all throughout Asia. Okay, so South Africa, Kenya, Eritrea, Ghana, and then in Asia, we have it in Japan, China, Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Korea, all throughout Asia. So now I'm like, what? It's everywhere. We have women doing it everywhere, right? So now, did they learn from each other, or is this just something that all women do? My conclusion is that this is a universal practice that all women do. This is an indigenous women's like practice, right? And so not only is it done everywhere, and I didn't give you guys an entire list. I'm also remembering Jamaica and Trinidad. I missed the Caribbean. So so there's I do have a list. It's over 30 countries, and again, spanning the entire, the whole globe, right? So what I have concluded is that vaginal steaming is a universal practice that all women have used. And when you look at what women are using it for all over the world, there's one universal use of it. It's postpartum vaginal steaming. But then the next thing is that it's used to treat a variety of women's health issues. It's used as a natural gynecology. So in Korea, they use it to treat cancer. In Haiti, they use it, anytime there's any gynecological disorders. And, it's used for fertility, it's used for recovering from sexual abuse, it's used for cramps, it's used for bringing back missing periods, treating infections, getting rid of fibroids, getting rid of ovarian cysts, a natural libido enhancement, addressing vaginal dryness, and on and on and on. Vaginal steaming is used all around the world to address all of these issues, right? And so what I found is that because vaginal steaming isn't something that's well known or talked about very often, in certain places they know that they can treat it for certain things, and in other places they know they can use it to treat different things. But when you look at all of the things that vaginal steaming is treating together, what you find is this is a complete system of gynecology, a natural gynecology that women everywhere have developed, to be able to use for their health and well-being. And so it turns out that vaginal steaming is actually really effective. It's a really effective advanced form of medicine, but it's never been considered an advanced. Well, so it's not necessarily well known, right? So it has never been studied. Okay, it's never been studied like with clinical trials in a Western university, and for that reason, it's kind of like this under the radar thing that or practice that is actually an advanced form of medicine. And this is how we know that it's an advanced form of medicine. I've been working with I started vaginal steaming in 2011, and in 2013 my friend started asking about it, and I started to sell vaginal steam saunas. And so with each person that I gave a vaginal steam sauna, with each customer that I had, I would do an intake and I would ask what her period was like. And then I would track and see how her period would change from cycle to cycle after using vaginal steaming. And over time, what I saw was that vaginal steaming was able to address heavy periods, absent periods, infertility, fibroids, ovarian cysts, infections. It was able to address all of these issues in a really effective way. And so you wonder why, is this like a placebo effect? Is the woman thinking it's going to help? No, it's steam. Steam is what brought in the industrial era, because of the steam engine, which could move a train across a whole continent, or which could move a ship across the whole entire world, right? The steam engine is a technological invention, right? That is, we know, can create a lot of power and a lot of movement. When it comes to the body, steam is also used in traditional healing. So it can be used to decongest the nose. It can be used for saunas and detoxification, right? For skin purification. And so when it comes to steaming, doing vaginal steaming, what the steam does is actually having a physiological effect on the woman's body. It's creating circulation, and it's creating a detox effect. And it's also creating a pushing effect, right? Because steam pushes, right? So steam has all of these properties. Not only that, steam is able to penetrate. It can penetrate the cells and get to, for example, an infection, like water wouldn't necessarily be able to get to it. And steam can travel and get further than the hands can reach, right? Or or a topical area. Steam travels and it opens, okay? So when somebody does a vaginal steam, the steam gets to the vaginal canal opening, and after a while of the steaming, it will actually open the vaginal canal and it will ascend the canal. And at the top of the vaginal canal is the cervix, and the cervix is usually closed, right? But after doing the vaginal steam for a certain amount of time, the cervical opening actually, it will open and the steam will seep through up into the uterus. And so steam is able to reach an area of the body that otherwise wouldn't be able to reach, right? And so it's able to create circulation in that area. And then an added benefit to it is steam is usually done with herbs. So you can also bring, certain properties that are necessary, like, for example, if there's an infection, you would want to have disinfecting herbs to an area that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get to. So it's really incredible, and it's absolutely an advanced form of natural medicine that can be used to treat, you know, almost all of the gynecological concerns that I've ever heard of. Like I've never, you know, found something that steam isn't capable of treating. So so it's pretty incredible, and women invented it. Women invented it, and they figured out how to use it. And so it was really interesting. I've trained vaginal steam practitioners to be able to use steam, and there's a midwife that's studying with me who's from Italy, and so her name is Claudia Svetes, and so she was like, oh, this is very interesting. I wonder about an Italian history, whether or not vaginal steaming is used. So she pulled out a book that she had. So now the book is called The Diseases of Women, and it was written by a female physician in the 1100s. Her name, the physician that wrote the book, was Trotula de Ruggiero, okay? And so with this physician, she was actually a professor. She was a professor. She was, I believe, one of the first female, you know, physician professors. And so she wrote this book called The Diseases of Women, and she talks about, you know, all of the different, you know, issues that women have and how to treat them. And so this book is really widely considered, you know, one of the foundations of current, you know, modern obstetrics and gynecology. And so in this book, Trotula de Ruggiero talks about vaginal steaming all throughout the book. She references, you know, how to use vaginal steaming and the different herbs that are used in order to treat a wide range of female issues. And so the book is very interesting. I'm going to show you guys. I'll show you guys the copy of the book. I had it for you guys. Okay, so that's you know, the Italian version of the book. In fact, I don't even think it. I think there's parts of the book that are written in English, but so it's in Italian. And so back in the 1100s, vaginal steaming was recognized as one of the main treatments that you used in order to treat gynecological issues, right? And so what's interesting is the book is considered. What Trotula de Ruggiero did was she brought together the indigenous practices that Italian women were doing, and then she brought it together with the modern medicine at the time, and so she brought this book together. So it's really interesting because it's like, I feel like it's kind of something similar to what I'm trying to do. You know, I still need to get the book, and I still need to find it in English. I actually can't wait to read it. So then it leaves the question, so when did steaming stop? When did people stop using vaginal steaming? And this is actually a question that I would say, you know, doesn't really have a full answer to it yet, but there are some hints and some clues. So right now, when you look at modern day gynecology, there's a strong focus on surgery and pharmaceuticals, okay? So there's a strong focus on these two things. And not only is there a strong focus on these two things, the way that, at least in the United States, gynecology developed was, I'll tell you guys about the grandfather of gynecology was this guy named J. Marion Sims. And he was a doctor, and he was interested in women's issues. And he was specifically interested in surgery. And so Sims happened to be a slave owner, and he was in the South. And so he started to do research on his female slaves, and he started to do surgeries on them, cutting them open so he could see the female organs. And he killed a lot of women doing this. And he also learned how to cut women open without killing them. And so once he had learned how to do that, this was considered amazing like medical finds. Now, just to put it in perspective, Sims was really into what he was doing. He was like this mad research scientist, cutting these women up. And so he would have and invite other physicians to observe his surgeries. And the other physicians actually were not into it. People thought that he was going too far and that what he was doing was sick. And so even at that time, what he was doing was really controversial. So so after a while, Sims moved up to New York. Happenstance would have it that he was sick and he wanted to go see some doctors in New York and heal up and whatever. So by the time he was up in New York, slavery was illegal in New York at that time. And so so once he recovered from his illness, he opened up a university, and he wanted to train other doctors, so they needed somebody to operate on. So anesthesia was new at the time, and so they convinced a society of white women to let them operate on them, and that they would use anesthesia so that they wouldn't feel a thing. And so he's the grandfather of gynecology. And so then the doctors that he trained under him was the first generation of these modern gynecologists. And the women that agreed to do the surgeries was the first generation of women that agreed to go under the knife, by these gynecologists. So gynecology is a form of medicine that is surgery. It's a surgical practice, at least the modern gynecology that's practiced right now. And so that's something really important to understand, that when you go to a gynecologist and you have issues, their main tool is surgery. That's their main tool. That's that's their main tool. If you go into a bagel shop, you expect to get bagels, right? That's what they make. So that's something that's really important to understand about gynecology. The current day gynecology that we have was a practice based on surgery, and Sims didn't base the practice on what midwives had been doing, what any natural practices, or the whole history of women's health up until that point. The current gynecology that we have basically started at that point. And so so that's really important to understand. And then in the early 1900s, then they added in pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals became a really important thing. So those are the two main things that you're going to get from a gynecologist. If a woman has really bad menstrual cramps, she's going to go in there, and if she's already had children, they'll recommend a hysterectomy for cramps, right? A hysterectomy, that's where they do surgery and they take out the uterus. If she hasn't already had children, then they'll recommend birth control, artificial hormones, which can then either regulate or take away her period, right? So those are the two tools that modern gynecologists have. So, somewhere in there as well, midwifery became illegal in the United States, okay? So there was a time period where doctors wanted to actually deliver babies. And so they made it, they did a campaign and they made it illegal for midwives to attend to births. And actually, if midwives did attend to births, the punishment could be the death penalty. And there were several midwives that were killed and imprisoned for delivering babies. So the illegalization of midwifery, combined with male doctors taking over female, obstetrics and gynecology, things that had traditionally been in the hands of females. These two things happening around the same time is basically what resulted in the loss of this knowledge, okay? That women use vaginal steaming to treat diseases, gynecological issues, and vaginal steaming postpartum. These male doctors didn't know that. They didn't learn it. They didn't study it. And I know we have somebody from Germany in here. One of my best friends from college was living in Germany, and she said at her birth, she had a high-risk birth, and there were 2 doctors and 2 midwives attending to her, and they were working with each other, right? So you have different forms of medicine where you can actually, say, modern science actually looks at traditional practices, or what women were doing, or midwifery, and knows what the benefits of it are. So those doctors would let the midwives, do that they were good at, and then the midwives were letting the doctors do the monitoring that they needed to do, right? And they were working hand in hand. This is how science and medicine could have developed, but here in the United States it didn't. Midwives became illegal, and men took over childbirth and gynecology. And so we had a loss in this knowledge, and so I don't think that that vaginal steaming fell out of practice because it wasn't useful. It fell out of practice because doctors took over, right? And I'm really interested, since this book by Trotula de Ruggiero is considered one of the foundations of modern gynecology and obstetrics. I'm really interested in what specifically happened along that line, and why, for example, current day Italian, gynecologists don't necessarily know about it. Also, what is the scope of the American gynecological practice? Like, how far is it, throughout the world? What I see in other countries is it does seem to be that gynecology is practiced in a very similar way, in that it's really focused on surgery and pharmaceuticals. I was talking to a friend from Nicaragua the other day, and I was like, "Have you ever done vaginal steaming? Do you guys vaginal steam?" And she's like, "No, I never heard of it." And I was like, "No, vaginal steaming. Like," I was like, "What about after you gave birth?" And she was like, "Oh," she said, "Yes." She said, "After I gave birth," she said, "the old midwives," she said, "they used to do vaginal steaming." She was like, "Wow," she said, "and I felt so good." And I said, she said she did it after her first 2 births. Well, she has 8 children. So I was like, "So what happened after the other one?" She said, "Well, then I started to go to the doctor, because it's considered better to go to the, she said, around here, the way that we see, we see that doctors and hospitals are like something that if you can afford, then you should go there instead." She said, "And really," she said, "they didn't do anything." She says, "They just sent me home afterwards. They didn't do anything like that." She says, "And it was really so nice." She's like, "Actually, I miss it." So she had received the vaginal steaming from the traditional midwife, but when she went to the modern doctor, she didn't get that kind of, she didn't get any type of therapy, vaginal steam therapy afterwards, right? So this is what happens. This is what's going on in different places. I had another customer, she's Jamaican, and she's actually using vaginal steaming to address fibroids. And so she was talking to her mom, and her mom was like, "Yeah, girl, I did that after I gave birth to you. Like, we do vaginal steaming in Jamaica." The girl was like, "What? Why didn't you tell me?" And her mom was like, "Well," she said, "the doctors, when they came to village, they said that we shouldn't do that kind of stuff. And then the church was saying that if we're using bush medicine, then it's voodoo, and it's evil, right?" So this is where, again, when you look around the world, traditional midwives still know about it, okay? Or you find indigenous places where they're not using modern medicine, vaginal steaming is still practiced. But in places where modern medicine is practiced, with the exception of a few places like Korea, in the places where modern medicine is practiced, then vaginal steaming has usually has fallen out of, out of knowledge. And not just because, again, not because it wasn't useful, but because it's actually being oppressed. What are the doctors saying? They're completely, in Jamaica, they're completely disregarding the Jamaican women and their knowledge, right? They've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years, right? This is what they do after a woman gives birth. And now all of a sudden, you have a doctor comes in there and says, "Oh no, that's evil bush medicine that you shouldn't be doing," right? So what do we have here? We have that there's a value, right? There's a value issue here, because you have male-dominated Western medicine discriminating or disregarding female-dominated traditional women's health systems, right? And you have here these people saying that those people are uneducated. You have the men basically saying that the women are uneducated. You have them disregarding things that midwives say as old wives' tales, right? I want to look into that saying a little bit more. Old wives' tales. That's old, that must be referring to midwives, right? Those are just old wives' tales. And this referring to something as an old wives' tale is the equivalent of referring to it as complete nonsense, right? Why is an old wives' tale equivalent to nonsense? Anybody? Why is that? That doesn't make sense, right? An old wives' tale. Women had a form of medicine that goes back to the beginning of time. Men were not interested. They used to call it women's affairs. So all of that knowledge of how women learned how to take care of the body is now disregarded as old wives' tales. You know, it's pretty incredible. And then, you know, so anyhow, these are some of my, my thoughts and theories on how and why vaginal steaming has fallen out of practice, right? So despite that, it doesn't actually mean that vaginal steaming is irrelevant. You know, it doesn't mean that vaginal steaming is ineffective, and it doesn't mean that it's not a scientific medical therapy, right? Anything that's changing the body is, a medical therapy, and vaginal steaming does that. But it does mean that we have to kind of research it. We have to help it to reemerge and make sure that we're not just allowing it to be disregarded, blanketly disregarded, especially when we know the value of it. And I'm going to tell you guys some of the case studies and show you guys that in a little bit. But the last thing I wanted to say along those lines, another reason why it gets disregarded is because it is commonly in indigenous populations. And indigenous populations or traditional, tribal peoples they have different forms of education. They don't go to the university and get a diploma and say, see, I got a diploma, right? There's more like it can be storytelling or apprenticeship. There's different, forms of medicine. So a bush doctor, pick any part of the world, a bush doctor is not somebody who's uneducated. They are somebody who likely doesn't have a diploma, but they're not uneducated. They started learning they had to learn for a long time and go through whether it was initiation ceremonies and do apprenticeships with the elders until they were able to learn their practice. But this isn't necessarily acknowledged by modern universities, right? And so so we have this really bad practice of dismissing indigenous tribal, self-subsistence communities as savage, and uneducated. And those, unfortunately, those populations of people in the world are the ones that actually still have the traditional knowledge of vaginal steaming. Well, unless we can be humble enough to acknowledge that, that they may have some knowledge that is very valuable, then it would obviously get dismissed, right? So I found some two recent studies done that talk about vaginal steaming. One was a study done in Turkey, and one was a study done in South Africa. And the studies done by international health organizations, and what the studies consisted of, both of them, was a survey of what vaginal health practices women were doing in rural areas and tribal populations. And one of them was vaginal steaming. And so what they found in Turkey, over 50% of the women were doing vaginal steaming. And the common uses for it were postpartum and absent periods. And then in South Africa, they found that over 90% of the populations they were surveying were using vaginal steaming. And there was there was actually several different things that the women were using it for. And the studies then concluded at the end that gynecologists working in those areas, traveling gynecologists, needed to be aware that the women were doing vaginal steaming so that they could advise them not to do it. That was it. We have to be aware that women are doing this so that we could tell them not to do it. And it never said why to tell them not to do it. There was never any questions about why are women using vaginal steaming? Does it work? Is it effective? And when it said to tell them not to do it, there was no reasoning for it. It just said, we need to know they're doing it so that they don't. And one of the studies, alluded to that it was unknown if this could be a cause of HIV. It's not. From all accounts of vaginal steaming, everything we know about it, for anybody who has actually looked at it, it would likely be helpful in treating HIV, right? So it's just so interesting to find these studies. These are the modern studies on vaginal steaming, and they're missing the point. They forgot to ask whether or not vaginal steaming was effective. They forgot to ask that. Not only that, they forgot to look into why is it that, or what possible, medical therapy might steaming be doing in these situations. They completely forgot to ask those questions. They disregarded it. And the reason why they disregarded it was because they were dealing with female, indigenous, tribal, rural populations. And all of those are basically the equivalent of uneducated and unknowledgeable. For no reason. That's discrimination. Okay? For no reason. So anyhow, so moving on, I wanted to talk about vaginal steaming and what vaginal steaming can do. Okay, so when I started working with vaginal steaming, I had a missing period. So I used vaginal steaming and I brought back my missing period, okay? And when my period came back, my period was different. Traditionally, or like historically, I had had a period that was like 3 days of brown blood, okay? After I steamed, my period came back the next day. It had been absent for several months, and it was fresh red blood period, and it smelled really fresh and really clean, and it was a clean period. And so I was like, oh, wow, that was different, and so I liked it. I decided that was a better period than the period I used to have before. And so, so fast forward, I think it was about a year and a half, that I sold my first vaginal steam chair to somebody. She had a very different period than I had. Her starting period was I think it was 8 to 10 days of heavy bleeding with large clots. She had really bad headaches and really bad cramps. Well, I had never had any of those things. So, I didn't really think that vaginal steaming was going to necessarily change her period. But as far as the clots go, I know that clots are a sign of like stagnation and old residue, and so I figured, okay, well, I suggested to her, if she does steaming before the period, maybe it could help to clear out some of those clots, right? Which, hopefully would decrease the cramping. That was my thought. So this woman steamed 3 days in a row before her period. When her next period came, she actually saw a lot more clots come out. Like a lot of cleansing came out. And the period, instead of being heavy, was medium flow. And it only lasted for 5 days. The next period that she had only had a couple of clots in it. It began and ended on fresh red blood, as before she had spotting at the beginning and end, or brown, residue. And her period was only 4 days long the second time. The third time she had a period, or the third cycle of the steaming, she had a 4-day-long period that began and ended on fresh red blood, and it was completely clean. It's like incredible. That was my period, right? That was the period that I had after I steamed as well. And so I didn't share that with anybody. I didn't share that with her. I was actually just like, wow, that's the same period I have now. It's so interesting. And it was a little bit eerie and a little bit weird, because I never in a million years expected that her period would go from what it was to the exact same period that I had, this 4-day-long, medium red period. So then when I worked for the next woman, she had 6-day-long period. She had a lot of she was having bacterial vaginosis problems, and so she had a very different period as well, and she had a short menstrual cycle. Well, I adjusted the herbs for her, and I gave her a treatment plan. And by the time we were finished working together, it took, in her case, I think it took 5 to 6 cycles. She had a 4-day-long period that began and ended on fresh red blood, and it was clean throughout. And she no longer had the bacterial vaginosis issues, and she also used to have yeast infections, and those had gone away entirely. Incredible. So now when I started working with women, I would work with them until I was able to get them to that period. And so what I realized is that, okay, so the period is actually a uterine cleanse, okay? The period is a uterine cleanse, and the old residue, the cramps, the clots, those are all signs that the woman hasn't got a perfect uterine cleanse, because the uterine cleanse only, it is designed to work on its own, but based on, the way that a woman maybe takes care of herself during her period, then her period can sometimes not get, her uterus doesn't always get all the way clean during the period. It's kind of like similar to the colon. The colon is actually self-cleansing, and women we're supposed to have bowel movements every day, but people get constipated and they don't have a bowel movement every day. It's possible, but it doesn't work 100% how it should. It's the same with the uterus, okay? So it was underperforming. And these women weren't getting these full uterine cleanses, the same as I hadn't. But once they were able to use the vaginal steaming to get this full uterine cleanse, it turns out that all periods look the same. So what I conclude, I started to call it the perfect period. I was like, oh, okay, you're getting a perfect period, right? Because this is the perfect period. The other interesting thing about these perfect periods is that all of the side effects were going away: the cramps, the pain, the acne, the headaches, the emotions. I was very emotional before I got to my perfect period. I used to be very emotional before and during the period. That went away. So like all of these things that were considered normal, or considered, that are just considered a normal part of the menstrual cycle, actually appeared to be negative side effects as a result of not getting the full uterine cleanse, right, during the period. And so this is a huge research breakthrough, because what we're currently told is that every woman has her own period. It's her own thing. It might be different than her sisters or her mom's, and everybody's period is just, going to be for her. So it may be 10 days long and heavy, and that's just the card that she was dealt, or it may be, 2 days long and light, and that's just the card that she was dealt. That's what we're told. And some people's period may be every 20 days, and some people's period may be every 40 days, and that's just what's normal for you, right? That's what we're told about periods. And as far as cramps go, that's just part of being a woman, and that's just part of having periods, right? I don't believe that that's true. Based on these observations of all these women's periods going to this exact same period, no matter where they were starting from, to this perfect period, I actually believe that there is a standard healthy cycle, and that the deviations from that are signs that, again, the woman isn't getting this full uterine cleanse, right? And so women need to know this, because knowing this, it makes it so that women, instead of just suffering through a painful period, they actually work on getting a better uterine cleanse, right? If practitioners and doctors knew this, rather than sending women home when they have pain, they would actually work with women to be able to address the source of the pain, which is that they're not getting this full uterine cleanse, right? So it's a really huge breakthrough. Then the next thing about it is that not only women who have these standard healthy cycles, they've got these perfect periods, and their negative side effects went away. The trippy part is women's periods started to sync up with the moon. Now we know have you guys heard the story of the red tent? I think there was like a book and a TV show, and there's this idea that, in ancient times when women had their periods, they used to all collect, together and bleed together in this red tent, and it was every full moon, right? And so this is like, this cool story, right, that we know. Then there's also this other phenomenon, which is that when you get together with all your friends, with all your girlfriends, and, have like a girls' weekend, then all of a sudden everybody's periods, merge together, and everybody gets their periods at the same time. Has anybody ever had that experience or heard of that one? We know these two phenomena, right? Well, it turns out when these women were getting a standard healthy cycle, when they were getting their full uterine cleanse, their periods were coming at the full moon as well. And it would come every full moon. With one variation, there's also that women's periods would come at the new moon. So I've found that half the women's periods come at the new moon and half of them come at the full moon. And I think either one of them is the right timing. And so you've got these women who now actually have their menstrual cycles in tune with nature, because that's menstruation means moon. Menses means moon. Menopause means moon. Menarche, that's when a girl first gets her period, gets moon. Oh, yes. So asking if I can speak closer to the microphone. So menstruation is all based on moon, with the observation that women get their bleeding and get their uterine cleanse once a month during the full moon, right? Or during during moon. And there's also another term for a period is moon time. Or one of my friends who's from Kenya says that they say I'm with the moon. That's another way of saying that that they're having their period, right? So we have like a long history of understanding that the menstrual cycle is tied to the moon. And what is the moon? The moon is a natural timekeeper. Just like the earth and sun, when the earth, goes around the sun and makes one, revolution, that's a year, right? So the moon is the menstrual, the timekeeper, the natural timekeeper for a month. When the moon revolves around the earth once, that is 1 month, right? A month also means moon. So that's one menstrual cycle. One moon is when the earth goes around the moon. So that's actually when women are supposed to get their period, during that natural timekeeping. So we have this revelation that when women have healthy periods, it actually comes in time with the moon, which just seems to be accurate with what the traditional knowledge of women has been since the beginning of time, that we even call the period the moon, or being with the moon, or menstruation, right, which is the moon. So so this is a huge breakthrough, because if somebody is in pain and they go to a doctor and they're told that that's normal, then nobody does anything about it. But if somebody's in pain and they go to a doctor and the doctor says, oh, okay, then there must be a problem, then the next step is to find a solution, right? Is to find a solution to the problem. And so this idea that pain is normal, has to be thrown out of the book, because so many of these women that I've worked with have had excruciating pain during their periods, and now they don't have any pain. So it turns out that pain isn't actually normal. And then the next thing is that it turns out having different length menstrual cycles, having different length periods, all of this is actually not true. When women have a good full uterine cleanse, then their periods are going to have, there's going to be the way that a standard healthy cycle is going to look. Okay? And it's much better than what some of these other periods look like. So I've worked with over 700 women that I've consulted with one-on-one, and the vast majority of them who do the vaginal steaming are able to get to this perfect period. So this is all an area where we need now further. These are just my observations, and where we need further, clinical research to back up. But in practice, I'm continuing to work with women, and now training practitioners to learn how to be able to work with women so that they have these standard healthy cycles. Okay, so that's the next thing. Oh, let me give you guys some case studies. I'll give you guys case studies right now. Okay, so we have okay, one girl came to me. She was like 25. She was young, and she was having her period every 3 months. And when she got her period, she was in excruciating pain, okay? And so I, questioned her about her period. And she had 2 to 3 days of black period blood is what her period looked like, and excruciating pain. So I thought through it, and to me, that black blood is a sign of really old blood. And if she doesn't have any fresh red blood at all, to me, that's a sign that the blood can't even get through her uterus. Her uterus is so packed up. And that's another reason why her period isn't coming, because her period is so packed up that it's just completely stagnant in there. So I had her do steaming. And the first steam that she did, she noticed brown residue afterwards. So she said, okay, my period's coming. And I said, that's not your period. That's old residue that's packed in there. So I said, continue to steam. So she continued to steam. And I think she did it for like 14 or 15 days. And at that point, her periods, so at that point, she actually got, a lot more that flushed out, and she got to fresh red blood. She did have a period, and then the red blood, she got past all of the black old residue, and she was able to get to fresh red blood. And then that period ended on brown blood again. So I had her continue to steam the next cycle. And so she continued to steam, and she was able to get to the next period to fresh red blood, the majority of the period, rather than all of the black blood. And she was able to get her next period to come, I think it was like 40 days later rather than 3 months later. And then she worked the next month and she was able to get her period to come on day 30 days later. And she was able to get to that fresh red blood. And she's never had the excruciating pain since. And she has been able to maintain a natural cycle. Now, she was so interesting to me because she was not married. She was single. And her doctors were telling her that if she had already had children, then they would just do a hysterectomy for her. That was what their solution was. And she was like, well, and so they even asked her, well, are you planning to have children? Because this is what we would want to do in this situation. And she was like, yeah, I do want to have children, you know. So then they were like, okay, well, then what we could do is we could give you pills to take away your period entirely. So it's a really strange way to deal with a situation where you have a uterus packed with old blood. Now, if you take away her period, now she's not going to get any uterus cleanse at all. Do you think that she will actually be able to conceive a child when it comes time? I don't. A packed uterus with old blood, a woman cannot conceive, which is another issue with, which is one of the main issues that we see with the rampant infertility that's going on. So, yeah. So, Zaire says they're always trying to cut women up. She said they're envious of the womb, so they want to take them out. Yeah. So it's just such an interesting, story. And so this customer, she's still single, she's young, but I know for a fact that when she gets married and that when she tries to have a baby, that she'll probably conceive on the first or second try, just like that, because there's no reason for her not to, right? With all that old blood that cleared out. And now she has regular cycles. So what does that mean? That means she has a regular ovulation. So her timing should be like that, right? Okay. So the next case study I'll tell you about. I was working with this woman. She contacted me and she was like, I'm in my 40s and I have fibroids and my doctors have been pushing me to get fibroids, and because my periods are really heavy and they're saying it's because of these fibroids. And she said, but I don't want to do it. And so I want to see if steaming can help. And I said, okay, great. So I gave her some herbs. I gave her, a steam plan. And so she started doing her steaming. And she contacts me. I think it was, I would want to say it was after a cycle or two, right? So she contacts me and she says, today my fibroids came out in the toilet. I was like, what? What? I said, how do you know? She said, because I was going to the bathroom. She says, and then she said, I felt something come out of my vaginal canal. She said, I looked into the toilet. She said, and there was 2 white balls of phlegm, okay? And she said they came out, and she said she knew they were fibroids, so she was like, she was funny. She said, all right, she says, later, bitches. She says, good riddance. And so she got rid of them. And her next period was less heavy. And then she said that she cleared some more. And I believe the next ones were in the shower that they came out. And so her period, she was able to get her period despite the fact that she was in her 40s, and women are told, oh, in your 40s, you're just going to bleed heavily until you go through menopause. Despite the fact she was in her 40s, she was able to get to a perfect period. She was able to get a standard healthy cycle. And not only that, the next time she did an ultrasound, she didn't have fibroids any longer. They were not able to find any trace of the fibroids. So she was able to naturally treat herself with vaginal steaming, avoid a hysterectomy or a fibroid surgery, and get to a standard healthy cycle that was healthier than any other, than her period had ever been in her whole entire life. And that was in her 40s, right? Incredible case study. Yeah, so I'm getting some interesting chats. Somebody was saying that there's an underground business for removing our uteruses and then reselling them, which I knew nothing about. It's so interesting. Okay, so let's see, who else are we going to tell you guys about? Okay, so I have this friend from high school. We used to play basketball together, actually junior high. And so she's friends with me on Facebook, and she knew what I did. She knew I was selling vaginal steam saunas. And finally she reaches out to me one day and she says, can I talk to you? And so she tells me that she's having she's having really bad cramps, and that she went to the doctor, and the doctor did an ultrasound, and they said, oh, you probably have PCOS or endometriosis. So they did an ultrasound, and they said, nope, you don't. And so they gave her a high dosage of painkillers. So then the next period, she said she was, again, in so much pain. And so she went back and she said, I'm in so much pain. Please, why am I in this pain? And so they did some tests on her and to see if she had infections, and it turned out she didn't have any infections. And so they just kept on telling her, look, we don't know. We can't find anything. We can't find any reason why there's pain. Everything looks normal. And she's like, yeah, but I'm in really bad pain. So that, again, they're like, well, you have your pain pill prescription, just take painkillers. So, I like this case study because, again, she was working with her doctor. She had come to the end of the road. They had nothing for her. And so I said, well, what's your period like? Her period was actually pretty normal. She was having 1 day of brown bleeding, followed by 3 days of fresh red blood, and then it ended with a day of brown bleeding. And there were clots when she did have the red blood. And I said, okay, well, let's clear out that stagnation. Let's clear out that old residue. So she was like, well, she goes, okay. She says, do you really think it'll work? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, but nothing works on me. Things that work on other people don't work for me. Okay. So she's a complete non-believer. She's a complete non-believer. And I was just like, I don't know. I think you have old residue in there, and clearing that, and that can cause pain. So let's clear it out. Right. So she got her vaginal steam sauna, and she steamed before the period. She got it in time, and she steamed before the period. And she had zero pain during that period, and she could not believe it, because she was expecting that if it takes 3 months to get results, it might take her 6 months. She was completely expecting that it wouldn't work for her, and she had zero pain. The other interesting thing to note, she had 4 days of fresh red blood. She had a standard healthy cycle on the first try after using vaginal steaming to clear up that old residue. She was able to have a perfectly clean period. So it was incredible, because this woman, she was missing work. She was having to take sick days, off of work, because her periods were so debilitating. It was affecting her whole entire life, and she was dreading the come of every period. And now, after just one, using the vaginal steaming in one treatment, her next cycle, she's never had those problems again. Never, right? So that's pretty incredible. Okay, and of course, I love when people have results that quickly. Sometimes it takes longer. Okay, so I'll tell you guys a fertility case. I was working with a woman. She was 43, and she did not have a standard healthy cycle, and she was trying to conceive. She had been trying to conceive for a while, and then she did conceive, and she had a miscarriage, and then now she had been trying to conceive again since after that miscarriage for a while. So it had been like a total of like 3 years now where she's been trying to conceive, and she's 43. So what do people tell somebody who's 43? They're too old, right? The eggs are old, right? There's a higher risk. Yeah, it's a high risk, and this and that, and blah, blah, blah. Women, I really don't old eggs. Oh, I hate that one. Women really get disregarded when they're in their 40s, unfortunately. So anyhow, but when I looked at her period, it wasn't a standard healthy cycle, right? So I just, I gave her suggestions on how to improve and get a full uterine cleanse and to have a standard healthy cycle. So in her case, she had old residue, and she also had a short menstrual cycle. And so I gave her specific herbs that helped to lengthen the menstrual cycle. So she worked, it took her 3 months, and she had a 28-day cycle on the 3rd month. And so she was like, yeah, she was like, okay. And she's like, well, so she had paused trying to conceive, and that's what I recommend. Pause trying to conceive. Don't try to conceive, just conceive. Get a standard healthy cycle, because that's a fertile cycle. That's fertile. That's fertility. So anyway, so she had her cycle at 28 days, and her period looked perfect. So she told her husband, okay, let's try. So so that month they tried, and they got pregnant. And that baby is due to be born any second now. It's been a completely healthy pregnancy. There haven't been any issues. It's so sweet. Somebody says, oh, it is so sweet, because I really, when you look at infertility and what causes fertility, it's all considered, there's so many consideration on age and zero consideration treated on whether or not the uterus is actually healthy and capable of the implantation that's necessary in order for conception. Because when somebody conceives, the very next thing that happens is that the zygote needs to implant into the uterine walls, and then the placenta grows onto the uterus wall as well. So a healthy pregnancy without complications has to start with a healthy uterus, right? So, yeah, really amazing, and of course I love that story because of her age. Nobody would have expected it, but I've seen a lot of women in their 40s conceive. Once they get to a standard healthy cycle, they're able to conceive. So, okay, I'll tell you two more case studies. I have two more case studies for you. So this one girl comes to me and she's like, this poor thing. I could tell that she was crying. It was an email, but you can just tell that there were tears on it. Okay. So she said, I've been bleeding for 16 months. Can you please help me? And I was just like, okay, well, what's going on? So she went to her doctor, and basically her doctor said, well, I could give you hormonal pills to get you to stop bleeding, but I'm worried that you will gain extra weight. Okay. So apparently she's a thick girl, and her doctor didn't want to give her the hormonal pills because he didn't want her to get thicker. Okay. So he didn't want to give her the pills. So what he recommended was a Dnc procedure. So a Dnc is where they use a tool to dilate, to open the cervix. So they stick the tool into the cervical opening and they crank it open. Okay. So they crank it open, and then they take this tool, and this tool looks like a needle ending, like it's kind of like this, and then they take it and then they scrape the whole inside of the uterus. Okay, so that cleans out the uterus, and this sometimes results in helping a woman, stop bleeding. So they had done a Dnc procedure on her, and so she never stopped bleeding after the procedure. So after the procedure, there's some bleeding because they've actually scraped the uterine walls, but then she again never stopped bleeding. So she's working with her doctor. She keeps on going to her doctor. She keeps on calling him, and they don't really have anything for her. So finally she just starts to research like alternative health methods, and so the interesting thing about her is that she had gone to the gynecologist I think every month, during this, and had stayed in communication with him, and he just couldn't help her. He just couldn't get her to stop bleeding. So she finally researched, and she found vaginal steaming. And so she, writes me this desperate email, can you please help me to stop bleeding? It's affecting my relationship with my boyfriend. It's affecting my work. I'm fatigued all the time, this poor girl. And so, and it's been 16 months, it's a very long time. So she, I gave her some recommendations. So there's this herbal pill. It's used by acupuncturists. So I basically directed her to go to an acupuncturist and get this herbal pill, which stops bleeding, and it did. Within an hour, within 15 minutes of taking the pill, her bleeding had stopped. Okay. So now that her bleeding had stopped, I monitored her, and 24 hours later, I said, okay, is there any spotting? Is there any blood at all? She said no. I said, okay. So I had her do a vaginal steam with the herbal blend that I have that helps to also stop, bleeding. I used all anti-hemorrhagic herbs, okay? So she does this steam, and I asked her again, okay, any bleeding, any spotting? She said no, okay? Believe you me, this woman stopped the bleeding within 15 minutes of taking those herbs. And she did vaginal steaming that entire month, and her period did not start until 29 days later. She had no bleeding, no spotting, and her period came 29 days later. Not only that, the period was, instead of being a heavy, long period, it was only 4 days long. It was a standard healthy cycle. Not only that, the period ended after 4 days, and her next period came 29 days later. Problem solved. She was able to get the help from vaginal steaming and herbal medicine that she wasn't able to get from her gynecologist. And she has never had excessive, heavy, or ongoing bleeding since. So it is really incredible story. In fact, I invited her to write a blog, so she has a guest blog on my website. Okay, so then the last one I want to tell you guys is just a completely different story. So that we had a woman that she approached me, and she said that she had a big fibroid, but what she described to me was not a fibroid. What she described to me was likely a cyst. So she said at her vaginal canal opening there was a big bump, a big swelling, and it was like the size of a grapefruit. So she wanted to know if steaming could help with that. And I said, yeah. I said, just steam until that goes away, right? So she started to steam. And she said after, I think, the second or third day, this huge swelling started to drain. And she saw that there was pus coming out of it. And so she continued to steam until all of that pus came out. And then there was actually just extra skin of the extra skin that was still there, and some dried skin. So then she continued to steam, and then that dried skin that used to have all of the swollen material in it, that skin fell off, and her vagina was perfectly normal after that. So now she was a really interesting case because she was scared to go to the doctor because she has in her family they had a bad situation happen with a gynecologist. Her grandma had after her third child, the gynecologist insisted that she needed a hysterectomy and told her that her uterus was sick and that they needed to do a hysterectomy. And the grandma was like, I don't think my uterus is sick. I don't feel sick. I feel healthy. I just had this healthy baby. And the gynecologist slapped her. From what I can tell, this was in the 1960s, and this was a Latina woman who had immigrated from Mexico, and English was her second language. And this was a white male gynecologist, and he didn't like hearing her talk back to him, and he slapped her. And so she grabbed her baby and ran out of the office and never went back to the doctor. Okay, and so now this story is, has been passed down, and they know that, their grandma doesn't go to the doctor, right? So now you've got her grandchild. So this woman that had this incredible story with draining the cyst, she went to the gynecologist, and she is somebody who was overweight. She's thicker, and the gynecologist was a female, and actually shamed her. She shamed her. She said, you're so overweight that I can't even find your vagina. And this was a woman who knew that she had a huge swelling at her vaginal canal opening and that she needed help. And she was shamed. And so she left the gynecologist and was scared to go back. And so she did confide that in me afterwards. And she was just so thankful that it had helped, because she didn't want to go to the gynecologist, and she didn't want to do surgery, and she didn't want to be shamed anymore, right? So, like one of the things that I even want to do is just, I've heard so many women's stories. I didn't know that women weren't getting good treatment at the gynecologist, but now I know that there are all kinds of things that are going on that really aren't okay, and that really aren't good treatment. And when you ask women overall, are you happy with what your health care and the gynecology care you're getting? You don't really get a sense that women are, just love going to the gynecologist. You don't really get that sense of things, right? So anyhow, so these are some of the case studies that I wanted to share with you. And again, all of these women were able to get to a standard healthy cycle, and they all came from very different situations, right? And somebody asked about miscarriage. Vaginal steaming can be used for miscarriage, and it's one of the cases where we need a skilled practitioner working with somebody, because miscarriage can be a dangerous time for women. But the most recent one I heard, somebody sent me a message, and they said that they have had 3 miscarriages, and they learned about vaginal steaming, that it could be used for miscarriage recovery. And so she steamed, and during her next period, she said pregnancy matter had come out. She believed, and the doctors had told her that her miscarriage was, that she had miscarried and that everything was complete, but actual pregnancy matter came out of her when she had her next period after doing the vaginal steaming. So a really important thing to know is that, miscarriages, in order for a woman to be able to have a healthy cycle after a miscarriage and be able to conceive again, she needs to make sure that the miscarriage is actually complete, right? And the only way that doctors can really do a complete one is if they do the Dnc procedure, where they do the scraping, right? In which case, still there can be issues with them missing some of the matter. And then there can also be scarring that happens on the uterine wall. So there's, and also commonly women will go under and, they'll put a woman to sleep to do it. So that it comes with its risks, right? But vaginal steaming is naturally helps get a uterine cleanse. So, in cases like that, it's really great. Okay, so, somebody said it makes me so angry to see women treated this way. I tell you, some of these stories are so crazy. Some of them are so crazy. One really crazy one that I heard the other day, I was at a conference, and this woman in her 40s said that she was bleeding. She was all of a sudden spontaneously started bleeding, and she was bleeding really heavy. She was flooding. And so she went to the doctor. And apparently, when she was telling the doctor what was going on, that she was filling up, 3 to 4 pads per hour and still bleeding out, and blood was getting everywhere, and she just couldn't help herself, she started to cry. And so what her doctor did was offered her antidepressants and sent her home. That was his only offer to her, was antidepressants. And he sent her home bleeding like that. What? Antidepressants? So yeah, so I don't know, how, I don't know how good the care is all the time, right, that we're getting. But I also know that gynecologists have tools of surgery and pharmaceuticals. So in cases where these are what's necessary, then you want to go to a gynecologist. But if those things aren't necessarily the best way to treat an issue, then still, if you go to a gynecologist, that's what they have to offer. And so that's something that's important for us to know, okay? Okay, so let's see what my timing's like. 1:20, I always go over, okay. Okay, so anyway, so what I want to do is now that I've learned how to treat women using vaginal steam therapy, what I've seen is that there's this need to move to a higher standard of women's health, okay? Gynecology is something, and they've learned how to do surgery, and they save women's lives and babies' lives through being able to do those surgeries. But it's not everything. Gynecology still has yet to advance, right? So, I want to move to, I have people emailing me from all over the world, sending me messages, calling me from all over the world who want help and who aren't satisfied with the options that their gynecologists are giving them, or they're doing what their gynecologist asked them to do, and they still don't have the results that they need, right? So, somebody does a fibroid surgery, and then they get fibroids again. Somebody does, this is something that that I see regularly, right? So I've developed a new profession. We have gynecologists, we have midwives, and now those are who women would go to if they have any problems. But now I want to develop another profession. It's called Peristeam Hydrotherapy. I've created this profession. So Peristeam stands for perineal steaming, which basically is another word for vaginal steaming. And hydrotherapy means being able to treat the body with water, okay? Because steam consists of water. So Peristeam Hydrotherapy, by definition, is a practitioner who can use vaginal steaming to address women's health issues, to address gynecological concerns, okay? And it was formed because my company, Steamy Chick, was selling vaginal steam supplies, and as I was working with these women one by one, I had this, this research breakthrough that women have standard healthy cycles, and that women aren't always getting, and that basically there's a natural way to treat things that are commonly treated with Dnc procedures or surgical operations, okay? So this profession just arose out of that need and that call by women, who are asking for help, a natural solution for their gynecological, problems. And so I've developed a program now. It's called a Peristeam Hydrotherapist certification program. And I am now training Peristeam hydrotherapists to be able to, treat women for the different concerns. So the main tools that a Peristeam hydrotherapist have, they use the period as the assessment. So the period is an overall indicator for a woman's health and her well-being. And so the Peristeam hydrotherapist is trained how to analyze a woman's overall well-being by analyzing her period. What color is it? Are there clots? Are there no clots? How long is the menstrual cycle? That is the indicator for the woman's health that the Peristeam hydrotherapist uses to assess what's going on. And then the tools that they use to treat any problems are vaginal steaming, herbs, herbal treatments, and then, and again, herbs with vaginal steaming, and then proper period care and education. So a lot of times, a lot of the issues arise because somebody is actually doing the wrong things during their period. And so we can know actually what lifestyle choices are causing these period imbalances, okay? So proper period care is a big part of it. And then there's a little bit of food therapy as well. There's certain situations where a woman might need to cut out sugar or add certain foods. So those are the main tools that that I'm training Peristeam hydrotherapists to be able to use to be able to get any woman to a standard healthy cycle, okay? And okay, so I'll tell you guys the courses. So the courses included, I gotta pull up my list. I've got foundational courses, so menstrual cycle analysis, the basics of female anatomy, understanding gynecological disorders in Eastern and Western medicine. I want my Peristeam hydrotherapists to be highly trained. They know what the gynecological disorder is. They know how it's treated, by gynecologists, and they know how it's treated by acupuncturists, right? And then they have their own way to treat it as well. So that way that they're not just working with a customer, but they're able to talk through the different options and be able to work in tandem with the different treatment options if necessary. And then the Peristeam hydrotherapy protocol courses. These are courses that are how to treat the different issues using vaginal steam. So I have one which is vaginal steam facilitation. It just teaches like the contraindications, the sensitivities, the basics that women need, or the basics that a practitioner safety knowledge, the basic safety information that a practitioner needs in order to be able to facilitate vaginal steams. Then I have vaginal steaming for fertility, vaginal steaming for postpartum, for short menstrual cycles, to clear up infections, to get a uterine cleanse, how to regularize long and missing cycles, how to do miscarriage recovery using vaginal steaming for menopause, sexual abuse recovery, addressing pain during sex, treating prolapse and hemorrhoids, menarche, a girl's first period and rites of passage using vaginal steaming, postmenopause, labor preparation, cysts and bumps, and then how to make an overall Peristeam hydrotherapy plan, be able to monitor if there's any negative side effects, and to be able to evaluate whether or not the plan was successful. In addition, I have courses on how to make vaginal steam herbal blends, proper period care, how to sync the cycle with the moon, the cultural anthropology of peristeaming, understanding steam and its scientific properties, addressing the adversaries and the critics of vaginal steaming, and then how to use vaginal steaming in combination and tandem with gynecological treatments. Okay, so that's the entire program. It's 30 courses. And so for each course, I charge $97 and then also the $97 for the exam. So in total, the whole program comes out to $5,000 and $5,044. And it's an entire certificate that somebody will be able to use that certification, to have their own practice and to address women's issues. Okay. So one other thing about the program, I have several of the courses are already done, but this year I'm working on finishing all of the rest of the courses, and they should be finished within the next couple months. I've been making a lot of progress on them, but there's, I think, like 8 or 9 courses that are already ready. So women are already moving through these courses. Okay. So, so in addition to the Peristeam Hydrotherapy program, what I'm working on is I'm working to make the this program recognized. So I've already got it so that the program is approved as continuing education for acupuncturists. I'm working on getting approval for it to be part of the naturopathic doctors' continuing education. So I'm working on getting it so that it is recognized within all of the alternative medicine fields. And then I'm also working to get it recognized within the medical field. So what I'm doing is I'm working with different research institutions and colleges. One of the researchers is online. Her name is Zaire. And what we're doing is I'm using my Peristeam Hydrotherapy Institute is funding and working with different research institutions in order to get clinical studies done that show that vaginal steaming is actually having these results that we're observing, right? Because what we have are case studies, but case studies, you know, it's a soft science. You really want to do clinical studies and show that you could create these results over and over again. When you have clinical studies, and these clinical studies are published and listed on the NIH website, then doctors can reference these. And then so doctors are going to be able to go to, they're going to be able to go and read the studies on vaginal steaming. And when their customers ask about it, when their patients ask about it, they're going to say, oh, you know what? Actually, yes, vaginal steaming has some benefit. And it's been proven to be effective in these areas. And so hopefully doctors will start to refer out. They may never refer out, but either way, we're going to make it so that it is well accepted and well-known practice that has scientific backing and that is practiced throughout, you know, it's right now it's the hottest new field in alternative medicine. So we're going to make it well accepted within the alternative medicine field regardless, right? Okay, so so that research, I'm really excited actually. I just talked to a UCSD researcher who's going to be doing a clinical trial, and I was really excited about it because I was able to fund it. The Peristeam Hydrotherapy Institute is going to be able to fund that study, and it's going to be done on bacterial vaginosis. So, so we've got a lot of really exciting things, and then furthermore, the Peristeam Hydrotherapy Institute, which is what I call my branch of Steam Chick that trains, you know, Peristeam hydrotherapists. I'm going to work on getting the Peristeam Hydrotherapy Institute either accredited of its own accord or adopted by a university so that it has that accreditation, right? So now what's going on right now is this is going to be, right now we have the first class of Peristeam hydrotherapists, okay? So, so this year, by the end of this year, we should have, I'm not sure how many Peristeam hydrotherapists that will end up getting their, you know, their certifications from me. But what's going to happen over time is that this profession is going to get recognized more and more. And when it is, and as these research studies come out, people are going to say, where can I find a Peristeam hydrotherapist, right? So everybody who's going to be doing the program this year, you guys are going to be the first generation of Peristeam hydrotherapists, which is really awesome. And also, if you want to find if you want to find the people that have been trained by me and certified by me already, I have a vaginal steam directory on the Steamy Chick website. And the directory shows you, you know, all of the different facilitators that have currently been trained. And you'll see that there's a lot of holes, you know, there's a lot of countries where there's no Peristeam hydrotherapist, and there's a lot of states and cities where there aren't any yet, but we need one everywhere, right? I envision Peristeam hydrotherapists are going to be, you know, when a girl starts her period, she goes and has an appointment with a Peristeam hydrotherapist, and the Peristeam hydrotherapist does a rite of passage with her, you know, and gives her education about proper period care, and she knows that stuff the whole rest of her life. Anytime her period is off, she goes to a Peristeam hydrotherapist, and she's able to get her period in balance. This is going to prevent so many problems. This is going to prevent the infertility issues, the pain, the disruption that women have from their periods, you know, if they're too heavy or if they're painful, right? I think it's going to prevent a lot of fibroids, a lot of ovarian cysts. So it's definitely going to prevent endometriosis. Endometriosis is absolutely a case of really full stuck, you know, uteruses with old residue. So so it's really exciting. And so I do have a special promotion for you guys, which is that, so the entire program is $5,000, about $5,000. And if you buy the full program up front, then I give you 10% off. But now I have an extra promotion for this webinar, which will give you an additional 10% off. So that will be 20% off. And so that would equal it will be $4,085. So that's almost $1,000 off if you sign up for the full tuition, for the full program. Then, of course, that's not in everybody's budget. So you can also do 2 payments of $2,522. You can do 3 payments of $1,681. You could do 4 payments of $1,200. You could do 7 payments of $720 or 12 payments of $420. So I tried to do something for everybody's budget. I got a huge request to be able to set up these, monthly tuition payments. So, so on whichever one of the options you choose, all of them are on an extra 10% off. From now through Monday, okay? From the end of the webinar through Monday. This is my special webinar promotion for you guys. And then I'm going to give you guys an extra bonus, and I'll go ahead and give you guys the link to the website. Let's see, where's my chat? Okay. So the direct link is going to be steamychick.com/Peristeam Hydrotherapy. So if you guys want, you guys can link on there and check it out. And then the very next thing about it is that I'm going to give you guys something I never do. Like I'm just trying it out this time. I'll see how, how much time I have to do something like this in the future. I actually love people. I love talking to people. So my bonus is going to be that if you sign up right now, then I will do a free consultation with you where we can talk about your vaginal steam needs, your client's vaginal steam needs. We could talk about herbs and herbal formulations for vaginal steaming, or if you guys like, I could just help consult about your business and how you could fit vaginal steaming into your business, or if you're already doing it, how you can grow your business. So whatever you want to talk to me about, whatever questions you want to ask me, I'm open, and I will, anybody who signs up during this webinar, I will do that free consultation with you guys. And I was trying to think of like a time limit, but reality is I don't really like having time limits. So what I'll do is I'm just going to, anybody who signs up during the webinar, I'm going to reach out to you guys. We'll create a time where we can chat, and we'll just, chat chat as long as we want until we till I'm able to address whatever it is that you want to talk to me about. And let's see, what else? Okay, so now I'm going to do questions and answers. What questions do you guys have? How can I sign up? So go to that link that I just posted, go to steamychick.com /Peristeam Hydrotherapy. You can also go to the Steamy Chick website and then hit Peristeam Hydrotherapist Institute, and then that will take you there as well. For the full program or one of the courses, I would love to take the program, but would have to pay course by course. Okay, so I'm going to do the free consultation for people that sign up for one of the monthly tuitions. So the free consultation during this webinar is if you do the tuition option. So you could pay full tuition, or 2 or 3 or 4, up to 12 different monthly. If you get onto one of the monthly payment plans or do the full tuition right now, I'm going to do that free consultation. How long does it take to finish the program? So each course, I'm going to have anywhere from, 1 to 3 hours of lecture, okay? Then each course also has a study guide so that you know exactly which information you need to take out of the lecture, and you're able to write it down so you can remember it. Then I have a quiz, and so you can move through the quiz and make sure that you've learned all of the actual content that you need. And then I do an exam for you. Okay, so you go ahead and you take the exam, and I grade the exam. And so if you get through the exam, and I know that you have learned all the information that you need, then you work with a practice client. So if you're working on the fertility course, then after you've passed the exam, then you actually have to get a real fertility client and suggest what your treatment plans are with them. And I work with you and supervise you working with this client. And we work with that client and that practice assignment until we're able to get the results that we're looking for, right? And when we do the postpartum course, you work with a postpartum mother. okay, and you suggest you do the same process, you learn all the information, then you start to work with your postpartum client. So each course, you know, going through the content of it, I would say takes like 2 to 3 hours, and then the practice assignment, you know, working with the person. It's hard to kind of gauge how many hours that takes, maybe 1 to, you know, 4 or 5 hours, just depending on how many times they need to steam. And then so each course I would say takes anywhere between 4 to 8 hours, and then the entire program, it really depends on how fast somebody wants to move through it. But currently, some of the courses are still yet to come out. And so I'm thinking, I keep on saying that all the courses will be done by the end of this year. But last week I put 5 courses down. So, you know, I'm thinking that the courses are going to be done way before the end of the year, but I just want to put that there just in case, right? So how long it takes to do the entire program? I would say it takes, overall, I think it's a 6 to 1 year long program, 6 months to 1 year, okay, depending on how fast somebody moves through it. So can you deduct if you've already taken some courses? Yes, people have been moving with me and doing different courses, and you can deduct those from the total. So when you go to checkout, you choose which tuition option you want. And then right under there, it asks a question. It says, how many of these courses have you already paid for? And so you say how many you paid for, and then that will deduct from the total, okay? So you're not paying for anything twice. If I brought this to the birthplace of the My Clinic, do you think that I'd be successful? Yeah, vaginal steaming is so hot right now, okay? So just to show you guys, when I first started selling vaginal steam saunas, I didn't even advertise it. But one of my customers had such great results that she published a blog about it, and the blog went viral, and people started calling me from all over the country. So within that first year, the first year I just sold them like haphazardly. The first year that I actually started selling them, that I, you know, let people know that I had them, I sold $24,000 worth of vaginal steam supplies. The second year, I sold $252,000 worth of vaginal steam supplies. So the company grew more than tenfold in 1 year. This year, the company is on schedule to grow at it looks like it's going to expand it's going to grow 4 times, 400% what it was last year. So it's really incredible. There's no stopping it. What's happening is women are getting these results, and they're talking about it on Facebook. They're writing blogs about it. They're tagging me all over Instagram. Anybody mentions a bad period on Instagram, they say, oh, you need to do vaginal steaming, and they're tagging Steamy. So anyways, and it's happening for everybody. There's one company that started up in North Carolina at the Honey Pot, Durham. And me and the owner, you know, we talk, and, you know, we're kind of like online friends. And she quit her job and, you know, was so scared that she wasn't going to be able to support herself. And everybody, she didn't get a lot of support, like, oh, you know, you're getting the, you know, your business could fail and, you know, all this. She's already making more than what she was making at her good job, at her full-time, you know, professional job. So that happened, I think, within about 6 months. So what I'm seeing all of these people, their companies are growing like crazy because the need is so, like there's such a high need right now. And that's why I said I'd be willing to talk to you guys to give business advice as well, because I'm pretty good at business, you know. It turns out I'm pretty good at business. And then not only that, during the first course, so the very first course I have you guys take is the Vaginal Steam Facilitator course. And that course, by the end of the course, once you get through that course, you get certified. So you can already start working with clients at that point while you start to train on how to work with different topics. You can already start working with clients at that point. And I give business advice at the end of that course. Like, look, this is how you could start from zero money and grow this business, right? Okay, so let's see what other questions we have. How does the payment plan work if you've bought the bundle and the other classes? Yeah, it's just the same thing. You're going to want to deduct the amount of courses that you've already paid for, and so the bundle was 5 courses. Okay. How long does it take to finish? It takes 6 months to a year. Okay. This is grassroots. And although it will be successful, be prepared to get a lot of pushback. One, because it's alternative, and two, because it's taking money away from the mainstream. Yeah, you know, you're right. It's already getting pushback. It gets a lot of pushback. I just ignore that stuff because the reality is, you know, people are, you know, they say, oh, this is, you know, you shouldn't be doing this, and, you know, gynecologists should, you know, whatever they're saying. The uterus is, the vagina is self-cleansing, and so people shouldn't do it. At the end of the day, the women that are having the results from it are the ones that are pushing it forward, you know. And so, you know, if somebody says, you know, if somebody has done steaming and they got rid of their menstrual cramps, and their sister or their cousin says, I have menstrual cramps, and they say, oh my God, you have to do vaginal steaming, and nobody's going to stop that person from doing it because they're not getting help elsewhere, right? So this need has been what's propelling it forward so quickly. Okay. So I'm getting some more comments. Okay, so somebody says that they went into menopause, so they don't need steam. That's not true, and that's why I have a course on vaginal steaming for menopause. Women after menopause do tend to have a lot of issues, okay? So I have a blog post on the website that's 9 reasons postmenopausal women love vaginal steaming. One is that they can still get infections. Number 2, they can still get fibroids. Number 3, they can still get ovarian cysts. Number 4, several women have phantom periods. It feels like they're getting their periods. They get very emotional. There's a lot of hormonal things that happen, and even cramping, but just no period because they don't bleed anymore. Those are all signs that the woman did not get a full uterine cleanse when she went into menopause, and they can be very uncomfortable. And then lastly, women after menopause tend to deal with vaginal dryness issues, and which causes a decrease in the libido or pain during sex because it's too dry. And vaginal steaming addresses all of those. So actually our postmenopausal women love vaginal steaming, and it's very beneficial for them. Okay. Does steaming help with recurring cyst and fibroid prevention, or only to get rid of them once they're there? No, it helps to prevent them. So fibroids, so in traditional Chinese medicine, fibroids are seen as a congealed phlegm. So in other words, when there's excess mucus, which can be in the uterus, then if it congeals, then that can be a fibroid, which is stuck to the wall. Well, steaming melts those fibroids out, right? So that's treatment. But also steam, when a woman has her period, she's shedding the endometrial lining. The endometrial lining is a mucus lining, which can get too thick, right? And so that shedding that endometrial lining and getting the perfect period prevents fibroids from forming. And then cysts are another issue where there's excess dampness and it gets stuck. So a cyst is like, okay, if you've ever had, in fact, sometimes acne there's cysts, okay? So basically it's when there's, you know, pus, it gets stuck under the skin, okay? And so it needs to drain. And so the same thing can happen. Cysts inside the vaginal canal or inside the uterus, it's actually some fluid that's not supposed to be there that has formed, and now there's a bump there, you know, over it, and it needs to drain. And so the same thing with making sure to get that period cleanse helps to clear out that issue, okay? Is there a course that teaches how to combine the herb mixes? Yes. So I have a course where I teach people how to make their own herbal formulas, and there's actually no test for that course because we have to create a universal formula that you can use for everybody, and then learn how to adjust the formula for different users, okay? And it's actually a lot of work for me. I work very closely with each person to create herbs, and not only that, I work closely with each person to create herbs in their region. So I'm working with people all over the world. So in, you know, Brazil, there's different herbs than they have access to in South Africa, than people have access to in Hawaii. And so I'm working with each person to get herbs from their region in order to be able to make those traditional herbal blends using the native herbs. So so it's a really great course, and I definitely recommend it for everybody. But for those that aren't herbalists or don't want to work with the herbs, I do have pre-made mixes. So what happens if you already received training elsewhere? That's fine. That's all just, more stuff that you learn. There are other programs out there, but none of them teach what I teach, because what I teach was based on my own knowledge and my own observations. So, for example, I started to notice that there were some side effects that happened from vaginal steaming, and that there were some sensitive clients. So I have a list of contraindications that you won't see and learn from any of the other institutes, and then the sensitivity. So, for example, I found that women with short menstrual cycles are really sensitive to vaginal steaming, and vaginal steaming can help them, but it also can bring the onset of bleeding. So we do need to screen for women who have short menstrual cycles. You won't find that in any other school or any other training. So what you're going to learn from me is just going to be more information. And there's information that the other schools teach that I at least know about 2 other ones, and one of them teaches Reiki and castor oil packs, and that's all great stuff, but that's not, my training is just on vaginal steaming and how to use vaginal steaming to address these gynecological issues. So what about women who have had a hysterectomy? So women who have had hysterectomies tend to deal with dryness and then scar tissue discomfort. And so vaginal steaming can be useful in those cases, and then also can still have infections. So that's, addressing the infections is also going to be useful. And then lastly, if it was a partial hysterectomy and the woman still has her fallopian tubes and ovaries, then the woman can still end up with ovarian cysts. I worked with several women in this situation. One of them was an incredible case because she had done the hysterectomy because she had fibroids. And then when she went to her 1-year post-op checkup, the doctor discovered that she had softball-sized ovarian cysts, and then now wanted to do another, wanted to operate on her again and take out the rest of the uterus. And she just couldn't. She was just like, no, it was way too much. I'm not even all the way healed up. And so she used vaginal steaming, and 3 months later she went in and she didn't have any ovarian cysts at all. She had completely addressed them using vaginal steaming. The doctor was flabbergasted, but he had no other choice. He had to cancel the surgery, right? What about bladder incontinence? So bladder incontinence often happens because the organs are out of place. So the uterus touches the bladder, and the colon, they all touch each other. And so, vaginal steaming is really useful for bladder incontinence, because when you can get the bladder and the uterus into place, then the incontinence goes away. I'm interested in the certification program, but would like to try steaming beforehand. Oh, before making the commitment. How long will the discount apply? The discount is going to be good through Monday. Okay, so you have all weekend. What is the Western medical herbal action for the gentle herbs? Anti-hemorrhagic. I have anti-hemorrhagic herbs in there that stop bleeding. And then I also have, so I always use a formula. So I always put like circulatory herbs as well, and nourishing herbs, because women need circulation and they need nourishment because they're losing blood. In fact, there's more. I have 8 different properties of herbs that I include in every formula, but then I augment, one of the actions based on what type of period she has, or what type of constitution she has. So I've seen a lot of that my friends are anemic, and doctors are saying this has to do with their periods. Absolutely. Women who do not take care of themselves properly during the period and properly nourish the blood during the period and after do tend to be anemic. And yes, vaginal steaming helps with that. That's one of the reasons why in all of my herbal blends I put blood tonics, which are nourishing herbs that help to increase her blood, nutrients. But also proper period care is important. And so that's one of the things that I do want to include in my program, because I want all Peristeam hydrotherapists to be able to educate women on why it's really important for them to know what blood tonics are and proper period care, and to eat properly during the period. I mean, I get women that are fasting during their period, like not eating during their period at all, doing liver cleanses during their period and only drinking juice. And you know what happens? Their periods go away, or they get anemic, they get headaches, they get fatigue. So, so proper period care is a really big reason why women are having so many different period issues. So I want my Peristeam hydrotherapists to be able to educate on that. Okay, what about PCOS? I haven't talked about that. So PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and it's the situation where women develop all these cysts along their ovaries. And vaginal steaming has been shown to reduce all of the side effects of PCOS and perhaps even to get rid of it entirely. I wouldn't know if it's getting rid of it entirely. All I know is that it's getting rid of all of the side effects of it and getting women to a perfect period, because PCOS women do not have perfect periods. A lot of times they have missing periods, and then when the periods come, they're painful. But and then ovulation, issues. But I've worked with women. We've been able to get to the perfect period, get the ovulation normal so that she's ovulating and can conceive. But in order to be able to know for sure if steaming is addressing the PCOS entirely, there would need to be an ultrasound before and after that shows that there aren't those cysts any longer, and that type of research hasn't been done yet. And then unfortunately, a lot of women say that they have PCOS that have been misdiagnosed, or that they have some of the symptoms of it, so they're considered that they have PCOS, but they don't actually have those cysts. So anyhow, that research does need to be done. Someone is asking if I wholesale my saunas. So the other thing, so my company started with Steamy Chick, and I've been talking all about the Peristeam Hydrotherapy Institute and the certification that we offer, which is a branch of Steamy Chick. But yeah, when you go to the Steamy Chick website, what you'll find is that I have vaginal steam supplies. I have vaginal steaming herbs, and I have a sauna marketplace where third-party sauna makers put their saunas for sale there. I did used to make saunas, but I don't make them anymore. Now I'm focused all on training Peristeam hydrotherapists. But those are third-party saunas, so you can reach out to my customer service rep. There's a chat down there, and then there's also a phone number, and tell her which sauna you're interested in, and she'll ask the sauna maker if they're willing to do a wholesale deal. It just depends on how many you're buying, probably. Yeah, penetrative sex. Someone asked if I'm speaking about pain with penetrative sex. Yes, there are a lot of women who have pain with penetrative sex, and there are 2 to 3 different causes of it. And so what I do is I go through the different causes of it and then how to use vaginal steaming to address those things. And there are some women that have never had penetrative sex their entire life without pain, and after just one steam session, with the majority of them, they're able to. So it's really really successful for that. So how many classes are released after each payment? So like if somebody's doing 12 sessions, then I think they get 2 courses per month, or something like that. In fact, I have it listed. If you go a little bit further down, Stephanie, you'll see the list of how many classes are released each month. Do I have any references for steaming in the treatment of sexual trauma? So I did a blog where I wrote about that because it's so important. It's such an important issue, and so that blog is probably going to be the most comprehensive thing that has ever been written about steaming with sexual trauma. But what I found was there's a Haitian woman who works with populations that have been trafficked, that have been been used for sex trafficking. Okay, and what she mentioned is that in Haiti they will always use vaginal steaming for their recovery. If somebody has had sexual abuse, then vaginal steaming is going to be done, and this is done in order to help to heal the woman and to bring her physiological relief from any pain that she's gone through. And then also it's an energetic release that helps to get rid of the negative energy from the experience as well. And then I worked with a woman who had been human trafficked. She had been kidnapped when she was a teenager, and she was in captivity for a year, and she escaped. And she's currently married, but she's infertile. Doctors have told her she'll never be able to have children because she has so much scar tissue. So her whole cervix and vaginal canal is scarred over. And so I've been working with her, I want to say since the end of last summer. So, not a full year. And she has had incredible results, and her scar tissue fell out. Her scar tissue completely fell out. And not only did it come out, her scar tissue came out, she got a perfect period, and she's gotten pregnant all within that 9 months. Did she mention how often they're steaming? Zaire, for what? For which one? For which case? Is there anything in the training for sexual trauma? You know, again, with everybody, I have to look at their constitution and their period and what's going on with them, and then I'm always going to adjust it based on that. For that specific case of the woman doing sexual trauma, and Zaire, she actually lives in your town, so if you wanted, you could meet with her and ask more information. She was steaming twice a week and she's been doing it for about 9 months. Okay, is there anything in your training regarding healing damage to the endometrium from fibroids? Yeah, so that's really interesting. So the endometrium, the uterine walls, can be damaged by fibroids, and they can kind of scar over, or just get irregular or hardened. And then not only that, it can get scarred over from fibroid removal surgery, and it can get scarred over from a DNC treatment. Okay, so we're along the same lines, because I had a woman come to me. She had done fibroid surgery, and they had removed 17 fibroids. So her whole uterus was packed with fibroids. They removed all of them, and her uterus scarred over, and her whole uterine wall scarred over. So the doctors were like, "Oh, sorry, now you're infertile." And so she was so distraught, and she came to me and she was crying. She was sitting on my couch and she was crying, and I'm feeling for this woman. And I said, "Look," I have no idea if vaginal steaming can help with scarring, but I said, "But you're having these period issues and whatever, and I'm gonna give you the right herbs, and we'll see what happens. If anything, I'm gonna get rid of your cramps, during the period, right?" So, and then she had brown blood at the beginning and end. So she started steaming, and then she contacts me and she says the scar tissue is falling out. And I was just like, "How do you know? Like, what does scar tissue look like? Like, what do you mean?" She said that it looked like jerky that was coming out. When she went to the bathroom and she wiped, there was like meat that looked like dried skin, like jerky on the toilet paper, and that it was coming out of her like regularly, like all day long. And so then she started to actually steam more frequently. We adjusted her plan. And so when she went in for her, so they actually wanted to do a surgery to now try to remove the scar tissue, with the 50% chance that the scar tissue might grow back. Okay, that's what they were going to do. So she had to go see a specialist for this. So she goes in to see the specialist. Now, she's been steaming for about 2.5 months when she goes in to see the specialist. And they did an ultrasound, which was going to be their pre-op ultrasound, in order to then now go in and do this surgery where they remove the scar tissue. When they did that ultrasound, they couldn't find one trace of scar tissue in her anywhere. And she was like, "I told you," she told the doctor, she's like, I told you I'm vaginal steaming, and that's what, and that the scar tissue was coming out of me. And she said the doctor was so embarrassed that she left the room, because there was another doctor that she was then going to show this scar tissue, right, that she had brought in the specialist. And so the doctor was embarrassed, and she just left the room. Somebody's asking, is it best to do your courses by completing levels 1 to 3? Or take advantage of this offer and the one-on-one consultation? I mean, I'd say do the offer. The way that I had it set up before was when I didn't have the full program, put together. But now that I have the full program put together, I think this is probably the most comprehensive way to go about it. Oh, nice. Gabriela is saying that she's Mexican and her mom taught her to do steaming since she was young. She's 49 years old, and she had her period from 11 to 48. Her period was always on time. She had a perfect period. She never skipped a month, and she contributes it all to her overall health. Oh my gosh, Gabriela, this is such a good story. She said she's never been in a hospital, and she's had been strong her entire life. Her husband is sterile, so she didn't have any children, but she attributes all of her praises to vaginal steaming, and she appreciates our mission. Gabriela, thank you so much for sharing that. Can you tell me where your mother learned about it, or what part of Mexico that your mom is from? I'm interested to know. And if you are part of an indigenous tribe, please let me know which tribe that is. I always try to keep track of where it is common. I have so many Mexicans that don't know about it, right? And so they're always surprised when I say that it is a tradition in Mexico, but I have to tell them where, right? Yeah, Gabriela, that's incredible. The Jamaican woman that told me about vaginal steaming, she was interesting. She said the same thing. She was like, oh yeah, she said, the doctor told us not to do it anymore, and the church called us, said we were doing voodoo. She said, she says my vagina is tight, it's tight, and it's always been right, and all of my skin has always been glowing, and I've always get compliments on it. And she said, and it's from the steaming. So women who do it, even when they've been told that they shouldn't, they know that it has really amazing, the positive side effects of doing it are incredible. They just go on and on and on. So somebody said, speaking of scar tissue, will it release scar tissue from having a tubal ligation? Okay, very good question. A tubal ligation is when somebody ties their tubes as a pregnancy, as a birth control method. I do believe that vaginal steaming can put somebody who's done a tubal ligation at risk of clearing that scar tissue and then putting them at risk of pregnancy. So it is one of the contraindications. Unless the person who's done the tubal ligation decides that they're okay with it and that they'll use a backup form of birth control, or whatever it might be. But yeah, I do think that vaginal steaming has the potential of release of clearing up the scar tissue from a tubal ligation. There are different types of tubal ligations. So the one that I think, so there's one where it creates scar tissue, and it's what they do is they burn the fallopian tubes together, and it creates scar tissue that now blocks the ovum from being able to go through the fallopian tube. That's the one that's contraindicated. All right, and we go through that in my course. I go through that with all of my my practitioners. Okay, so now I missed some questions earlier, so I'm going to scroll up. Anybody, if you asked a question when I was talking that I didn't answer, go ahead and feel free to post it again. I'll just scroll and see if I can find them. How can I contribute towards these clinical studies and research? Yes. Okay, so the Peristeam Hydrotherapy Institute, right now I am collecting researchers that are doing research, okay? So I have one who was interested, we talked, and we created an independent research study about fibroids. I have another University of Maryland is interested in doing a study, and they're still deciding exactly what part they want to study, but they think that they're going to end up studying endometriosis. A UCSD researcher reached out to me, and we formed a study on bacterial vaginosis, and I was able to fund that study. She only, she gave me a budget and said, well, let's look for some private funding. And again, since the Peristeam Hydrotherapy Institute is, a branch of Steamy, which makes a considerable amount of money, that I was able to to diverge that money to be able to pay for that research. Then I have another two professors that reached out to me that are sexologists, and they're going to be doing a study on how vaginal steaming changes a woman's views of herself, or how it changes her sexuality, basically. And then I have one more researcher. I have two more researchers that we're still formulating research projects. So now I do prefer to work with trained researchers, so I need people that are trained in research, because I'm not trained researchers, right? So if you are trained in research, please send me an email. I have information about it on the Steamy website, on the Peristeam Hydrotherapy Institute. Reach out to me and let me know what your areas of interest are, and what, and we can talk, and I can help you formulate, a research project or whatever it might be. We need so much research. There's so many areas. Oh yes, the other researcher that she's a PhD student. She's going to be doing her dissertation, and she's going to be including vaginal steaming. She's a therapist, a family and marriage therapist, and wants to study vaginal steaming and depression, and how it can help women in cases of depression, or whether or not it's useful in situations where women are depressed. Okay. I asked about bladder weak. Okay, so bladder weakness and recurring bladder leakage. Okay, so vaginal steaming, it doesn't, the steam doesn't just go up the vaginal canal, it also touches the urethra, and the urethra also has a hole in it, and it also brings circulation to that area. So what I noticed is that what people report is that it creates stronger urine flow and then less leakage. Those are the two things that have been reported. And then it also helps to treat UTIs in particular. So those are the things that I know. It hasn't been studied further than that, and necessarily why. I believe that it has to do with bringing the circulation and the heat, and then also getting the organs back into place, which happens with vaginal steaming. As a practitioner, should we get insurance? That's right. So, yeah, insurance is great. You know, in general, people should have general liability insurance. If somebody's only a Peristeam hydrotherapist practitioner, then they're going to have to look for an insurance agency that covers this. And there are some that have been willing to cover this, and then there are some that haven't. So I have a Facebook group of the practitioners, and they always discuss insurance and different insurance companies and which ones are covering them, and how to talk to them. So so you'll definitely be able to, through our network, get some advice about that. And then do I accept financial aid? I'm not sure if so what I did was I added a credit option. So PayPal offers credit in some situations. So I added a credit option to my checkout menu. And then in general, if somebody doesn't have enough funds to sign up for one of the tuition plans, what I recommend is you can actually just go course by course. So the courses are $97 at a time. So I just recommend, get the 97 together, do that course, get the 97 together, do that exam, and then to just move like that so that it goes according to your budget, and you can do it, according to when that money comes in. Okay, so somebody signed up for the herbal course and then the Vaginal Steam Facilitator certification course. That's fine. So when you're checking out for the full, for the full program, you choose your monthly tuition, and then you would select that you have already taken 2 of the courses, and then that's going to deduct that price from the total. Will I accept a grant for a program from a nonprofit? I don't know. Send me an email about it. I've never got that that offer before, but yeah, send me an email about it, and we'll see if I can do that. Okay. All right. It looks like our questions are coming to an end, and this is also going to. I'll give you guys. I'll say it's 2:10 right now. I'm going to give until 2:30. Anybody who signs up by 2:30, I'm going to go ahead and do a consultation with you guys, which I love to do. Oh, Stephanie just signed up. Whoop, whoop. All right. Welcome, Stephanie. I love meeting people. I love working with people one-on-one, and so it makes it a lot more fun for me too when I know you guys. So yeah, hopefully I'll have, I'm going to make enough time to be able to talk to everybody who signs up, one by one. So I'll give you guys until 2:30 to be able to do that. All right, everybody. Any more questions before I sign off? When are the payments taken out money? The day that you sign up. So today's the 18th, so the next one will be taken out the next 18th. Oh, we're getting lots of questions. When will the replay be available? I'm going to get it available as soon as possible. It should be, tonight or tomorrow morning that I'll send that out. And thank you all. I'm sending you all the best and the best wishes. I'm going to give you guys, somebody's asking for my email. My email is hi@steamychick.com, and I'll be able to answer any of your questions. And thank you guys for taking the time. I know this was long, and also spread the word to other people that are interested. Oh, I just remembered the last thing I wanted to say about insurance. For example, acupuncturists have their own insurance, and so vaginal steaming is covered under that. Massage therapists have their insurance, then vaginal steaming is covered under that. Okay, so that's something that people have been able to do as well. So anyways, thank you guys all. I'll see you guys next time.